The Joe Rogan Experience.
So let's get to the criticisms, because there's people that are saying that these are not dire wolves, that what you've done is just manipulate the DNA of a gray wolf.
They are dire wolves because we have manipulated the DNA of gray wolves. We took dire wolf genome sequences from animals, one animal that lived 72,000 years ago and one animal that lived 13,000 years ago, and we lined them up next to each other and figured out what it is that makes a dire wolf a dire wolf. And then we used the tools of genome engineering to bring those traits back in Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, that are 3 direwolves that are alive now. And that has created these animals that you saw that are bigger and they're stronger and they have that direwolf coat. And that's a cool thing too. That coat, the light coat color that you see, was something that we absolutely could not have known without the ancient DNA, because no one has ever seen a direwolf. When we published a paper before I joined Colossal many years ago that was about direwolf evolution, we had a paleo artist reconstruct what direwolves looked like, and they made them red or reddy brown. And that's because so many other animals seem to be reddy brown, like mammoths are. Neanderthals seem to have had red hair, and so we thought, sure, why not? We didn't know because we hadn't sequenced the part of their genome that we could use to see what color their coats were. But both of these 2 animals that we had higher coverage DNA from had gene variants in genes that are associated with pigmentation, how our coats, the hair color and eye color and things like that, that suggested they had light-colored coats. And so we thought, that's cool. We'll have that as one of our key direwolf traits that we're bringing back.
Is it possible that it's like other wolves where there's a variation, but you would only sequence the DNA of ones that had white?
It's possible, yeah. And I'm sure there were different colors, but it's interesting to me that 2 animals that lived so far apart from each other in time and geography would both have this light color coat. So maybe it wasn't that every direwolf had a light coat, but it must have been a predominant color in the population.
What was the environment in which they lived? So if they lived 13,000 years ago, you're talking about the Ice Age, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that that's why they had white hair?
It's possible. Both of these animals were from northern part of their range where it would have been colder. They did live through previous interglacial periods. 125,000 years ago, it was as warm as it is today, or even warmer, with predicted to be no ice at the poles. And also, we know direwolves were really common around the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. We haven't been able to get any DNA out of anything from La Brea. That would be an amazing discovery.
Does the tar just destroys everything?
Don't know if it destroys it or if it gets into the bone in a way that we can't get the DNA out, so somehow inhibiting the recovery of the DNA. We'll get there. I mean, someday we'll figure it out, and that's going to open up a lot of really cool
It kind of makes
animals.
sense that, like polar bears, having that white color would aid. Polar bears actually have, it's clear, right?
Yeah, they have, their hair is long and it's clear, and that's why polar bears, and have you seen those pictures of bears in zoos where polar bears in zoos where they look green?
No.
It's
They get covered in moss?
It grows in the hair is hollow.
Whoa.
And so if they're too wet and not cold enough, they can turn this like weird
Oh, they have mold.
inside their hair.
Oh, wow. But it just makes sense that them being that color would have an evolutionary advantage for hunting, because you're in something that's completely white.
Yeah.
And you don't see like a grizzly bear. You'd see like, oh, look at that dark blob that's moving towards us.
We did some work in my academic lab where we discovered that polar bears and brown bears hybridize with each other. This is one of those funny stories about academia with a scarcity mindset there, where we submit a grant proposal and we say, hey, we have this really cool observation that polar bears and brown bears hybridized during the last ice age when they overlap with each other, and it gets rejected because they're like, that's dumb, we know that doesn't happen. And then we found another hybrid polar bear from the previous interglacial, and then there's evidence that they're hybridizing today.
Yeah, they find them
hunters
today.
go out and do this. Yeah, so whenever they overlap geographically, they breed. But what's interesting about this is that we always find the hybrids living like brown bears, even though it's probably that the mom is a polar bear. Because a brown bear boy will wake up, from hibernation and go out onto polar bear territory to scavenge for food. And a polar bear female is an induced ovulator, whereas brown bear females are seasonal. So a polar bear female will ovulate in the presence of a male. So the male comes up to her and will mate her. The other way around, if a polar bear brown male had encountered a brown bear female, He's probably more likely to eat her than to mate her, right?
Oh, wow.
And so, but that's weird then. So why do we always find the hybrids living with brown bears instead of living with polar bears? And the polar bear biologists who we've worked with, I've worked a lot of time with Ian Sterling, who's a fantastic polar bear biologist from Canadian Wildlife. And his hypothesis is straightforward, that they can't successfully hunt seals if they don't have that white fur.
Completely makes sense.
It does, right?
Because they have that ability to swim and they dive under the water. And they're also like really clever in how they use those ice shelves and swim from one ice shelf to another.
Yeah, but they hide in, they even have those things where they cover their nose with their hand, the black nose with their hand, because the
That's
black
nuts.
nose, I know, it's insane, right?
That's nuts.
Biology's cool.
It is cool. It's cool like to think of like how they became successful doing that. Like, who figured that out? How do they have the self-awareness to know that the end of their nose is dark and that other animals can see it?
But they also hybridize, just given the chance to do so, right?
Yeah.
Because biology doesn't recognize species concepts, right? Biology
Right.
doesn't care that animal's called a brown bear by us and that animal's called a polar bear.
Right.
They run into each other. They're like, cool, just like our Neanderthal ancestors. Right?
Are those hybrids? Are they fertile? Can they have babies?
Yes. Yeah. This is
Interesting.
actually how we discovered it, because we found that the place where brown bears hybridized with polar bears during the last ice age was probably the ABC Islands off the coast of Alaska, because the ice was that far south at the peak of the last ice age. And brown bear boys would move onto the islands as the habitat got better, where they encountered these populations of polar bears that had been stranded there as the ice receded, pretty much. And so they hybridized there. And all brown bears in North America today have ancestry from that admixture with polar bears.
Jeez. Wow. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's just like how we all have ancestry from mixing with Neanderthals.
Look at
And
that.
Is that from the German zoo? Because there's a couple of bears at
But that really looks like a hybrid, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It looks
right.
like there's a lot of traits of both of them.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Bears are some of the most fascinating animals ever.
Claws.
Yeah,
So
it's just
impressive.
it's just an incredible animal. So I'm really glad you said it that way. That nature doesn't know that there's a polar bear and a brown bear.
Why would it?
You're right. It's just our definitions.
Yeah.
Is this part of the problem with the criticism of this science? Is that we are being very specific about what we're calling these things based on our own definitions that we've all agreed upon.
Yeah.
But that the true nature of genes is that there's this like proliferation and fluctuation and all these animals breed with each other, and it's like
It's kind of that, but it's also that we haven't agreed, right? So there's this group of academic scientists who are trying to grasp so tightly to this very precise definition of a species as having to do with DNA, how much DNA matches something else. But that is, and it's interesting. I think the reason that we keep having this conversation is because it's genuinely interesting to talk about species concepts.
Sure.